Hey guys, I just wanted to do a quick little demo on how we get a really nice tight fitting half lap when we're doing boards this way. There's a couple little tricks that we could do to get that really nice and tightly fitted. We want to switch to the marking knife instead of using a pencil, because a pencil is always going to be kind of somewhere on the outside of our square, whereas a knife of course could get right up into that crease. So this is going to be much more accurate, which is going to make a much tighter joint. So I have a couple scrap pieces here. This is, without the tenons, it's roughly the inside of here. As you can see, I went ahead and found the center on the mark here. Just make sure you kind of mark it on both sides. Of course, we could always make sure it's dead center by kind of doing that flip it over trick. And then we flip it over, mark that up, and at the same time we'll mark up our other piece as well. I'll just demonstrate on one. Next thing we want to do is find the center of this guy. I like to use the balanced ruler trick. I think it's just a lot faster and a lot more accurate than trying to measure and math it out and all that stuff. Make a little tick mark and reassemble my square. Square that off, of course. I like to find the center. I kind of line that up just with my fingers, transfer that across with a little tick mark, and transfer that as well. Sometimes if I'm getting fancy, I'll mark them all up at once, but sometimes to get that accuracy, you'd have to get it clamped up and all that other stuff. It's not necessary. Okay, so we have our two pieces marked up. We know that our boards are 3/4 of an inch wide, so we will just do a little tick mark just for our own reference, about 3/8 of an inch on each side. And that is just kind of for our own visual reference on kind of where that's going to be. So what I'll do is I'll get my square reassembled, put my knife right on that little tick mark, bring my square up to it, and square that across. Once I have that, I'll take my 3/4 inch chisel back towards the reveal side, finish side, drop it into that nice little scribe line there so it's kind of locked in place, nice and tight, and then just a couple blows. Next thing we want to do is start kind of whittling this out. What we want to do is make what's called a bird's mouth joint. Now that's usually used most frequently in roofing, where they're kind of joining the roof line down with the wall. I'm not a carpenter, so I don't know all that terminology. I just know that this is called a bird's mouth joint. So what I'm doing is kind of carving back a nice kind of little casual joint there, just like a little slope. Hopefully you can see that on camera. Just kind of where this kind of notches in like so. If I want to make this a little bit more pronounced, I could drop this chisel right into that crease, tilt it up, and more round, and then kind of carve this back. That should be good. Clean up my corner a little bit. So we have this nice notch here that we're going to just drop that piece into. Now really what I'm going to do, it helps if you get this clamped up because we don't have 3 hands, but for the sake of the camera, I'll try to hold this like so. What we want to do, if we follow this plane down, you can see that's going to be kind of on the outside here, which is not going to be nice and tight. So we actually kind of want to go in just kind of underneath. You can see that the angle of the blade compared to the woods, just so they can kind of get that straight down. You can even kind of go in a little bit because you want this to be super tight. So I'm probably holding it at like maybe a 1 or 2 degree off center. Kind of hold that down so the knife doesn't move. Again, this would be a lot easier if you kind of clamped it up, and so in class, if you're demonstrating this, I would probably suggest doing that. Once you have that, you can score that across. And again, drop our chisel into there. Make sure it's nice and locked in. And then again, kind of carve this out. I don't have to do too much, but basically what we want to do is make sure that that is going to be kind of a nice tight fit. It's barely kind of going in, and that's kind of what we want. So that's pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. So I will take my knife again. I'm going to find right in that tight little corner there, and get my square brought up to there, and then draw my knife down. Same thing on this side. Find that corner, draw your knife down, and just so that students and the camera can see it, I will draw that line in. Do the same thing on this side. It's always nice to have a line to follow. So drop the knife right in there, slide the square up to it, and right there. So now it's just really a simple matter of cutting this out, but we don't want to cut straight up and down. We actually want to kind of angle in. So we're going to take our saw, and this is exaggerated, but we're going to cut in like that on both sides. And that way we're going to hollow out the kind of the middle here and let those sides kind of crease into. They'll just kind of compress the fibers of the mating board, and it'll look like a nice tight fit. So I'm going to adjust the camera here so you can kind of see what's happening. Get that clamped up. Again, I want to get my saw right into the crease of these things. So I'm going to use my finger to kind of hold that secure, and I'm going to put like a little bit of English, so to speak, just to get like kind of a 1 degree slope. So I'm kind of going into the waist. I'm actually going to go past that line, and I'll explain why in just a minute. Same thing here. That's it. Good. So you see, I was probably too aggressive on this side, but that's okay. We could always just pare that back with a chisel. This one is right about perfect. It's just on the waist side of the line. So let me show you what's going to happen next. I'll get this kind of back up into position. And this guy just pops right out. Now I'm going to find that little scribe line there. Let me make sure I'm back on camera. There we go. We're going to find that scribe line. Now the reason why I cut past this is because if I were to kind of miss, if the student didn't cut all the way down to this line, if they just cut above it, and then they go to chop this out, this chisel suddenly becomes a log splitter, and the whole board just splits in half. And I've had a couple students do that, so that is a very real possibility. So it actually doesn't hurt anything to go a little bit past, so that's what I'm going to advise my students to do. I'll find that scribe line, and you'll see with just like 2 blows, this little piece of wood is just going to pop right out. There we go. So the whole thing chips out. That's why chopping with the grain is always a dangerous thing if you are not careful. Now what I'm gonna do is now pare this back. I'm gonna find the edge here and then pare it back, leaving just a little bit, about a 1/16 of an inch or so of that material. And that will just compress right into the the fibers of the mating surface, and it gives it a nice tight fit. So I'm gonna take my chisel, holding it at just a slight angle so it's grabbing some wood. And you can see what's happening there. I got that material out there. I'm gonna pop out. I have a little bit more on this side that I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna do the same thing. Just about a 1/16 of an inch or so. The nice thing is if you need to tune this up, you could actually, now the material is so thin, you could just kind of square it up with hand pressure. This side's a little bit tight. We have just a little bit too aggressive there. I know that that's gonna not work so hot, so I'm just gonna pare it back again with hand pressure. That looks pretty good. Do the same thing on this side. Just about a 1/16 of an inch or so on the inside of that fibers. And another one over here. That's a pretty fat 16-inch, so I'm gonna just kind of carve that out by hand, because it's once it gets really tight to the edge, it gets a little risky. Carve that back as well. Again, the wood is so thin that really doesn't matter. So that's what we have here. We have just a little bit of material there. You can see where the straight pencil line is. Now this should kind of just compress here. Now if I had finished this off, notched that out, this would fit nice together like a glove. Because I'm only going halfway, this piece will just sit just like so. Now you can see that we have nice tight graining all the way around. Exactly, that's just pencil right that we see right there. And if I pull this apart, if I could pull it apart, you can see what happens is that those fibers actually kind of start to crease into this board here. So that's kind of what we want. That's what makes that nice tight joint there when it fits together. If you don't get it, if you try to wedge it in too tight, then you do run the risk of, I haven't seen this happen, but I could just see it happening. You run the risk of one of these boards kind of physically snapping in half. So if it is an extreme angle coming in, like so, you definitely want to have the student pare that back. And that's pretty much it. Those are really just kind of the caveats. Like I said, other than having two students that actually split their boards, I didn't have any issues with students kind of making a nice tight joint. Some of them were better looking than others, but that's the case that we see all the time anyway. So there you go. Thank you much.